Hello, I'm 𝗍𝗵𝗲. I'm a partner at 𝗬𝗏𝗺 Partners, an executive search and leadership advisory firm. I'm also the co-founder of The Council, a private network for senior executives. And this is Leaders in Motion.
Welcome to Leaders in Motion. Jan Hogg is chairman of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 He partners with SaaS leadership teams to embrace practical vertical AI engines into the products, not generic copilots, but AI built for specific operational contexts like workforce scheduling, demand forecasting, and labor efficiency. Based in London, serial operator, serial builder, now architecting AI-first transformation for SaaS companies. Jan, welcome to Leaders in Motion.
Kevin, thank you for having me. So it's a pleasure to be on.
Great. Yeah, like we do always, would be great for our audience to know you better. And if you can quickly introduce yourself, your career journey, and what you're currently up to.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kevin. So I was in the Navy when I was younger, Royal Navy, left in about 1990, and then got into sales with Xerox, and then into software sales, then into I was involved in the sort of original .com boom, with a web development agency that I owned in 1997. And I've been running my own businesses or been very entrepreneurial in public companies, which quite often I've been involved in founding all the way since. And I've got a very keen interest in horse racing and betting, hence the background. I was one of the founding members of what was called At the Races, which is a TV channel, which is now called Sky Racing. And then eventually I ended up with a load of betting shops, had a problem that I couldn't solve by buying a cloud-based solution. So I and a couple of other guys built a SaaS platform, which has gone on Shopworks. And that is a staff scheduling workforce management platform. Halfway through that journey, we decided that we should be getting involved in AI, but we didn't have our customer base wasn't a big enough addressable market to justify the development costs. So we created a separate company called 𝗧𝗵𝗲, which its main purpose was to build AIs for SaaS customers. And my own company was the first customer. And since then, we've gone on to supply lots of other SaaS businesses with those. And that's how I ended up as chairman of 𝗧𝗵𝗲.
You are very much involved in AI, and what obviously the questions around software and AI, do you see what the headlines are saying about AI and SaaS, which is the SaaS apocalypse?
So if you are a SaaS founder or a buyer of SaaS, to be honest, but both are important, but if you're a SaaS founder or CEO, you should absolutely be nervous about what AI could do to your business and have a strategy. But I think you can put sort of SaaS I like to put it into three simple buckets. There's a sort of what I would call simple SaaS, where really the SaaS tool is, it's designed for one person and it solves a very simple solution. So an app where you could, as a one person member, for instance, I could keep my to-do list. Okay. That sort of very simple SaaS is likely to get replaced because I can build that in about 5 minutes using an agent, and then I've got my own version. I don't need to buy it. So SaaS at that level of the spectrum is at risk. At the other end of the spectrum, things like payroll, workforce management, much more complex SaaS, that has a strong moat, and this is the second bucket. It has a strong moat, it has the data, it has governance, it has security, it has integrations, it has historical data collected. There's a lot of advantages to that SaaS. However, if you are in that bucket, you need to get with the program and start adding SaaS in a genuine way to your product. And I think if you were a SaaS founder and you tried to sell your product now without some sort of AI strategy, you're going to struggle. And then the third category is what I would call AI native. So these are guys who started with a clean sheet of paper and said, how can I reimagine payroll or workforce management? And they are coming for both other categories. And what they lack often is distribution, sometimes trust because they haven't built up a customer base, sometimes credibility for the same reasons, but they're quick, nimble, often with potentially with a superior product. And the challenge for really the debate is, does the AI native get distribution before the middle bucket, which is the high sort of touch SaaS, before they get AI enabled, if you see what I mean. So it's like a race. So SaaS isn't dead, but it needs to change.
How much time do I have before this catches up, and in order to transform my business to integrate this AI agent into my servicing?
I think I would, if I was looking at it, I would say it depends on your sales cycle and implementation cycle. If you are, and quite often the more complex the SaaS, the longer those two things are. So if your implementation cycle to go into an enterprise and roll out, payroll is a year, and the sales cycle is a year, you should be pitching a vision now that is where the buyer is comfortable that you have an AI strategy, but you have longer than if your sales cycle is a month and your implementation is 2 days, where the customer can just log on and configure, because their cost of switching, and therefore your moat, is lower. So it is not quite a straight answer, because it's variable, but it's part of the reason why the more complex SaaS solutions have a moat. If you're in multiple locations rather than one, that includes the moat as well.
And founders, some of them are waiting for the agentic or AI products mature so that some tools becomes available. How do you see that? I think this is something that you also offer your clients, but how do you see about this approach?
Yeah, I think with a SaaS platform, that you should have a strategy where there can be multiple things you want to add to it. So a good example might be if you've got sort of an analytics BI tool included in the dashboards, if you like, included in your SaaS platform. Really, you ought to be offering natural language querying. Build me a dashboard that shows me the top performing shops over the last 2 weeks in this category. I ought to be able to query my data. So that sort of stuff is available now. AWS have got a product we use. 𝗧𝗵𝗏, and all the other major cloud vendors have similar products. Then you've got people are plugging in LLMs for chatbots. To be honest, quite often that is the go-to solution, because it's the quickest, easiest way to make it look like you've got an AI strategy without having an AI strategy. And then there are more focused, if you like, vertical specific solutions like we do, where we've got like a forecasting engine. It's not an LLM. It's machine learning and data engineering and constraints programming, but we sort of supply those sort of vertical engines, and we've got a whole suite of them. So, some companies, so if I was an AI founder, it comes back to build, buy, partner, really. So I might want to license 1 or 2 engines from us. I might think some of the IP is so important to my business, I'm going to build it myself. I might embed something like 𝗧𝗵𝗏. I might find other partners that have got different engines than we've got that are, cover different areas of functionality. What I think draws it all together is ROI. So if you've got a SaaS platform, an alarm going, is that disturbing you, Kevin? If you've got a SaaS platform, you're probably going to charge, X dollars for the base solution without AI, and X plus Y with the AI. So if somebody's going to add the AI version, with fully embedded, it has to generate an ROI. If this is per seat or per location, and you're putting a 50% uplift, which is typically what people are pushing for by adding AI, does it generate an ROI? So putting a chatbot in that allows you to query the FAQ pages doesn't really add to the ROI. Putting in a forecasting engine that generates a better forecast and optimizes staff more accurately and reduces labor costs or drives up sales, you can measure that and get an ROI. So what I would say to founders is you need multiple elements to be added to your platform. We can help with some, but there are plenty of other places. But that together, it has to increase the ROI if you want to charge more for it.
As you rightfully said, it's not always a straight line when it comes to rebuilding, and you have a lot of different situations, and you are falling into different buckets as a SaaS company. However, some founders might feel that transformation might carry a lot of risk. How do you see this transformation and how to be efficient during that transformation journey?
I think, Kevin, it's a really good point. 100% there's risk, okay? But there's risk in doing nothing. We sort of like to describe it as sort of rebuilding the aeroplane whilst you're still at 25,000 feet. If you think about it, you've got, if I'm in the bucket of the middle bucket where I'm the AI SaaS the non-AI first SaaS platform, that AI platform's coming after me. Like we said, depending on my sales cycle, I've got a limited amount of time to re-engineer. I can't stop supplying customers or onboarding them. So you literally have to rebuild your platform, re-engineer it whilst you're still delivering everything without losing your existing revenue that pays for the re-engineering. And you have to move quick, and there are risks. Guess what? That's why it's tough to build a business. You have to overcome those risks. So good question, Kevin, but definitely there's risk involved.
How would you advise to have the healthiest relationship with a vendor during that transformation?
Yeah, so I'm a purchaser in this example you're saying, Kevin. So yeah, if I was purchasing SaaS, and we'll start off with, I'd want to fully understand what the AI strategy is for that SaaS platform. Where are they in the journey now? How are they going to do it? How reliable it is. But there's also other factors. So what we do find is rolling out AI into enterprise requires a large amount of change management. There's resistance within the organization to taking it. People are nervous about their jobs. People don't know they don't always know what what's behind the AI, because it can be a black box. Okay. So there's a lot of elements that need to be taken into account. So probably the bottom line is that the way of rolling out software previously and implementation approaches that might have worked need modifying. Okay. So you need, in the past, we might have done a small group trial, refine the configuration for the SaaS, then roll it out to the whole enterprise. That still is a good approach for AI, but you're starting to look at things as well, like how it's positioned. So we had a good example where one of our partners sold to a customer and called it auto scheduling. And when they repositioned it to be schedule assist and said to the managers that were doing the scheduling, this is an assistant to you. It'll do 70 to 80% of the work. You get the final say and do the final bit of work, and you have the control. The acceptance rates went up just by that positioning. So if I'm the CEO, does the vendor have those stories to tell? Does the vendor got explainability and dashboards and other things that allow that manager to understand whether the AI is doing a good job, or whether are they expected to just take it blind? I suppose in summary, Kevin, the team that's doing the rollout have to have some experience of doing that, and have to be able to convince me as the CEO that they're not going to upset all my staff, make a mess of it, and I'm going to end up with a solution that I don't actually understand whether it's adding value. I can't measure it, that sort of thing.
Talking about upsetting the staff, how do you get the buy-in from your team? How do you implement and transform? Do you think this is also a cultural shift, cultural transformation journey as well for a company?
Absolutely. I think it's wider than just one SaaS rollout, because pretty much every business got 10 SaaS platforms, and they've all got some sort of AI now. It's more, I think it has to come from the CEO, is my view, is if the CEO isn't an evangelist for AI, then that change won't happen. One of our partners, 𝗵𝗵𝗄, so they're a global workforce management partner that use our AI engines. Their CEO, Clayton Pine, he was annoyed with the company website. Okay, he didn't think it was that good. So he was so annoyed that over one weekend, he vibe coded a replacement, rebuilt the whole website, the corporate website. And then the story goes from him, he was telling me this over breakfast. He went into work on Monday, said to marketing and tech, okay, fine, here's the new website. And of course, they gave him a list of issues, why it couldn't go live, why it wasn't production ready or enterprise standards. So he said, okay, and he took it back, and then he got Claude Code to rebuild it, to add in the additional requirements that tech and everybody given him, and then he came back until it was live, and that is now the company website. And he stands up and he tells that story to that company-wide. And if you think about it, that changes the perception of all of the other managers. Okay, so one, the CEO is now very close to what's capable of being done with agentic coding. In this example, the CEO absolutely knows what's possible. They went on to do a product team, very small numbers of people, built a new product edition, and launched it in 6 weeks. They were telling me using, effectively AI development. And of course, the rest of the board, the rest of the senior management all now know that if they go back and push back on something and they're a bit negative or resistant to change, the CEO is likely to say, well, to be honest, just give it to me then. I'll get 𝗬𝗃𝗀𝗀 to build it. And funny enough, you could imagine how it changes the dynamic. It's a true story. Having spoken to some of these other people that we work with, they all sort of refer to this story, and it has changed the way they perceive AI, and they're all trying very hard to upskill themselves so that they're not behind the CEO. So I think, going back to the original question, if the CEO, if you took the alternative to that and said, right, the CEO wasn't in there and the CEO had delegated it to a team, it's called delegation trap. The team that you might have delegated it to might be the very people that have most to lose from embedding AI and getting AI automated. They might be resistant to change. So the CEO can't delegate that, in my view. The CEO has to get good at it. And quite a lot of our partners, I speak to CEOs, they're fully on, they fully understand how to use these tools.
If I take the other side of the spectrum, the CEOs who are more reluctant or will be facing a little bit more challenges, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you, a bit like we were saying, if you're the SaaS platform, you have no choice but to embed AI in your business because there's somebody out there doing it to take your company off of you. If you're the CEO of a business and you don't embrace AI and get to be efficiency, somebody else is looking to implement it properly, and they will come and take your market share off of you. They'll be able to do things cheaper, efficiently. They'll be ahead of the game in terms of forecasting and delivery. And so you've got the same problem. You've got to rebuild your aeroplane at 25,000 feet when you're CEO of a company. And how do you start? And it's pretty hard it's a high risk project. And if you, as the CEO, haven't got your head around what's possible, you're not close to, people are coming back and say, oh, we can't do that. AI is not good enough. And you just accept it, you are taking a risk.
Okay. Putting ourselves in the shoes of a manager, director, really familiar with AI and using agents, building agents, but with the top management more reluctant. How would you see that person being able to push that initiative and transformation journey?
I think everybody's got to, if you're middle management and you're pushing forward with AI and agents, and the senior management are resistant to it, you've almost got to ask the question, is that an organization you want to be part of? I know it's not simply just about AI. People have got values and history and all sorts of other things, which keep them to a company. So you throw the bricks out of the pram and resign. But it's worth pointing out to senior management that actually you want to be developed. So there's one, you want the business to do well, and you believe that AI is important to do that. And two, you need to be developed because your skills are getting stale if you aren't being allowed to use AI. And there are lots of examples of businesses out there where people have got they've just got Copilot and that's all they're allowed to use. When they're at home, they're building apps for to manage their kids' football team, and it's highly sophisticated and it's built with Claude Code or OpenClaw. Those people know what's possible and they're frustrated, but that they need to raise that in their and try and push the company. And if they ultimately, some people will leave companies because they feel that strongly about it and the company doesn't move. So again, if you're the CEO, there's a risk that if you don't move with it, you will lose some of your best, brightest people. And I would suggest the ones that are driving, that really understand that AI are potentially some of your best people for the modern challenges.
When it comes to therefore building a team, it's not only about upskilling, which you mentioned, but also about recruiting for this new era of AI. Do you have yourself some advice or common practices or best practices when it comes to hiring talents in that AI era?
Yeah, so one of the things we've recently added to our recruitment at 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is we used to just do a code test. I say just, we interviews and other things, but we would just do a code test to check somebody's technical ability. Now we get people to vibe code some sort of solution. And really one of the things it shows is people's sort of, one is comfort with the tools and understanding how the tools, but two, it's their like creativity and problem solving. Because if you give somebody a process to re-engineer or reimagine, they can think through a solution that works as an app or as a web page. What you're doing is you're almost testing their product skills. So we definitely believe that you'll hear quite a lot where people say, oh, a good developer with AI becomes a great developer, which is true. Okay. But you could also say a good product person with AI can actually build the whole thing end to end, because a good developer that's building stuff in a small organization with where we're wanting to move fast has to have some sort of vision of what they're building, and product people are very good at that. So we've got developers where they're building using vibe code to build sort of small tools that they use just within the development team to make things more efficient. And so I think that it's blurring the lines between sort of product and development, and product is very important, because if you think about it, the cost of building is lower. Therefore, the deciding what to build becomes more important. Okay, because if you build rubbish, if your idea is rubbish, it doesn't matter how well built it is. And I think that's true with all knowledge work. So you need people that have got that sort of creativity, problem solving, vision. It doesn't have to be a product, but it could be a process. A manager could automate a process. So having a vision of those systems and how they hang together and building the tool to do it, the tools are there for them to just solve those problems and automate them and build agents. Because that's what an agent is really. It's an automated SaaS tool that solves a problem, a workflow or some process. So I think that needs to be part of the recruiting process now. And I would be testing for it and testing for that problem solving, creativity, and ability to use the tools.
There is this also conception, and I'd like to have your take on that, where some people are seeing AI agents as meta-human that can do a lot of different things and could replace people. How would you see that? Do you see it as a myth?
I think it's a very wide subject, Kevin, which is, does AI replace jobs? And, so, I think it's definitely not a myth. There are some tasks that I do now that I would have had an assistant do. The thing is we don't have the budget for an assistant, so we don't, we don't tend to employ assistants as they, or personal assistants. So I've always done it myself. So what AI and agents do allow me to do is automate things that I probably wouldn't have got round to do. So there's a sort of this isn't my phrase, but I've heard it on a few podcasts where people talk about sort of infinite backlog. There's always more work to be done than you're ever going to get to using traditional methods. What the AI allows you to do, and where I see this on product development, is we're now accelerating product development, getting more stuff out there, which is great. But actually, we would have had a roadmap of, let's say, 5 items in a year, 5 major items. Now we can have 15 items. And if the AI got better, could we have 25 items? And then you would start looking at your thing and say, well, actually, are there 25 items that you could do? And the answer is yes, of course there are, because you could expand into other verticals. There's the same team can be used to expand the output considerably. That's where I tend to want to go. So you empower people, give them tools, and you expand the output. You tackle the infinite backlog. Are there some jobs that are, that are going to be quickly replaced? Yes, possibly. I think, I personally experiment with some of this stuff. I have a team that do it. We are still not successful in completely replacing jobs. I think some of the people that say, oh, we've got rid of 40% of our headcount because of AI, I'm skeptical of that. I think there might be other reasons why people cut costs, and it's a business, so that's fine as well. But I'm skeptical that they managed to completely replace all those tasks. There are some roles that are that are being reduced. Like you need less customer service people because that's quite easy to automate. But there are other roles, like if you took the example of the scheduling, what we would argue is that by using an AI to schedule the staff and using the AI to forecast, you save the manager, let's say, an hour or two a week, and you deliver a better outcome because the forecast is more accurate and you've got you're positioning your staff when there are customers available much more accurately, and there your revenue goes up. So we would say that it's enhanced capability. That manager's extra hour, that nobody's replaced that manager. That manager's now got something a bit more productive to do. They've got their own infinite backlog of things they could do with that hour, or 2 hours. So I think, we could spend hours debating it, Kevin, but I think that's my sort of broad take on it.
I was also referring to seeing a lot of AI experts or influencer with their Mac Mini and giving a name to the agents, Patrick, Robert, Emma, etc. And Patrick is doing finance and Emma is doing sales. I hear from you that you are building tools. So how do you see this type of noise that we hear?
I'm going to make a sort of a confession here. So my team of agents on my Mac Mini are all named after Ocean's 11 characters. So the strategy agent is Danny, Rusty's coordination, Ruben is finance. But really all that means, so I've got 11 agents on there, all of Ocean's 11. And they've all got different tasks. So Basher does development, and so does Livingston if you're fans of the film. So it was just an easy way for me to understand which one of those models, how they were sort of focused. So, for instance, if you took the strategy agent, it is linked to my preference, which is GPT 5.5 Pro. Okay. If you look at the development, it's Claude Code. Okay. And one of them's Codex. And so what happens is I come up with what I find already. So I use this a lot, Kevin. So I might want to build a little application that I use myself. So I've got one that does a 6-week rolling cash flow. It just pulls the stuff out of my accounting package, tells me what's in the bank, tells me what invoices are due and paid. It knows, because I told it, what direct debits go out regularly, and then each Monday it just forecasts cash flow. So if you took a simple application like that, I gave the brief to Danny. Danny divided it up. Some elements, the integration would have been done by one agent. Really, there are ways of having different models being used, okay, that are specific for that job, coding or design, or reasoning, separating the agents so they don't get confused. So you're breaking the task into small lumps. And, quite often you have to give them the task of, fine, have you done phase 1, and then tell them to go and move to phase 2 and break it down for them. So it is, again, I've got little tasks that I got them automated to go and do, like that little cash flow, but it's still, it's making me more productive. You could say that it replaces, junior assistant for me, but I never had that person in the first place. So I think there are still limitations to these agentic solutions. I enjoy using it. It's a little bit addictive. You end up I work more hours now than I did before I discovered it. That's for certain.
Interesting. And do you also see that at some point in time, you would have agents managing other agents?
Yeah, well, I think I already do. So what happens is Danny will come up with a strategy and the brief, okay, and then he will allocate it to Rusty, which is Brad Pitt's character in the film, whose job it is to allocate and say, right, here, I need some UI design. So I'm going to give that to I've got Gemini, the UI agent will come up and draft up some UIs for it. Then it'll decide that there's a database needs building. It'll decide that there's a back end or an integration. It'll allocate all of those tasks to different agents that have got the right tools and are focused on that area. And that coordination agent, I'm not involved in that. It is saying, right, I'm going to, it'll report back when it's done. So and I've got a QA agent that's job it is to test it against the criteria once it's built and things like that. So that sort of stuff is already happening. Agents and sub-agents that are delegating tasks to each other. But the main task, it's like still, if it's a complex feature, you still have to manage that process through like you would any other project. You have to check in, one of the things that keeps everybody busy is the agents are very good at asking for more information. So you get a deluge of messages come back, say, right, this is what I'm thinking of doing next. Here's the options. Please approve it. That all takes time, which is why, it's not a silver bullet or a free lunch. You have to invest working.
And you mentioned that you didn't replace anyone. However, I assume that having this agentic allow you to grow more, to build more, and to expand with the same number of people within the team.
For startups and smaller businesses, I think that there's definitely a future where you can have a sort of a 10 or 20 person organization where that's small enough that the human network, you don't have to have layers of bureaucracy in that, and you can empower those guys with token budgets and tools. And if all of those people are pretty AI native and are using all the tools, that could be a really powerful team. And those sort of venture capitalists are out there looking for teams like that could generate a very high revenue per employee, incredibly productive per employee. Now, in order to do that, you almost need to start from scratch with a team of 20 people that are highly skilled, highly focused. So that is possible. And Silicon Valley is probably full of them now. Do you know what I mean? 5-team startups that are using OpenClaw, and they're empowering themselves, and they don't need middle management, and they can grow quickly. And that's where we are with 𝗧𝗵𝗲. We are small. They're all AI native. I'm the chairman, and I'm the least technical, and they use me to test things, because on the basis that if I can get the integration working, then the documentation must have been good and it must be easy to do. So a team like that, it would be very hard to re-engineer a large organization, multinational organization, to that sort of standard. And there's the risk for them.
Coming back maybe to your scale, with right now, do you have an estimation of how much you could grow with AI and all the agentic system that you have today versus pre-AI era?
I think I think that it's the classic addressable market. So we sell SaaS engines to SaaS partners. So you'd have to use VC world. They would start by saying, well, how big is that market? How much would likely to buy an engine from somebody else and not build it? You scale it back. So if you said what's the addressable market, for me the question is can I hit my target share of that addressable market? Let's say I wanted to get 30% market share. We're fairly niche, so there's not dozens of people selling AI engines to SaaS platforms. So the question is how many people do I need to get to that addressable market? And in the past, I might have needed 100 people, and now I reckon I could probably do it with 20 people, maybe 25, and that's that's a mix between deeply technical people that are highly empowered, and then some more traditional roles. Like we still end up getting on a plane to Australia or Denmark to see partners and launching products to them and taking their sales, doing workshops with their sales team, helping them understand the value. I can't see that going away. People are still going to get on a plane, and that's very hard for the AI to scale. So those sort of roles you might be able to scale by 50% because they're planning and documentation and proposals and stuff. The presentations are all quicker to produce, but not much more than that. The developers that are building the products and doing the integrations, those we can scale 5 to 6 times, I reckon.
You travel quite a bit, Australia, Denmark. You are based in London, and you mentioned the Silicon Valley and the pool of talents, AI native talents. Do you see some major difference?
Yeah, so I'm in London today in our London office, but we've also got our development team is in Edinburgh. So Edinburgh is I'll talk about London and Edinburgh. So Edinburgh is a great place because the University of Edinburgh is they would argue on a par with Cambridge in terms of turning out data graduates, and we wouldn't question that with the quality of people that come through our door from the universities. London is on a different scale. It's a global city really rather than a national city, and you can see now that sort of DeepMind was founded there. It's Google's if it's not their head of AI development, it's certainly the largest one outside of the US, and Anthropic and and OpenAI are both opening big offices just down the road. So yeah, there's definitely a competition for talent in London, and London's got 4 of the top 20 universities in the world within striking distance in Oxford and Cambridge. There's definitely a pool of talent there for AI development. What we struggle with, I think, in London is our venture capitalists are, a friend of mine uses the phrase, they're venture in name only. They're basically private equity where they write venture on the title, whereas the guys in Silicon Valley have got a bit more bottle, in my view. So that's I think, a challenge to the UK, as well as we tend to be a bit more bureaucratic, in Europe and the UK, and more risk averse. So I think it's still a great place to do business. I'm not looking to move, but there are reasons why Silicon Valley keeps churning out the multi-billion-dollar companies and Europe doesn't.
And you mentioned about universities. When it comes to AI, there's this maybe misconception that it's only for the software engineers and the tech talent. But in what we discussed, AI is everywhere, right?
Yeah, I think, I think everybody needs to get their head around this and learn how to use it. If my daughter's in sales, so my son is the CEO of Sold by AI, and my daughter's in sales, and I'm encouraging her to get a Mac Mini and learn how to get a GitHub account and build stuff. And, because sales is an area where that will be challenged by AI, and the salesperson that is best used to, can best use AI to research through LinkedIn and, find targets and optimize the message to those people will do more deals than the person who is using more traditional methods, over a long time. Now, you still need those traditional methods and interpersonal relationships and things, but you're going to be a more efficient salesperson. And you can apply that to pretty much any knowledge work, in my view. So, I think if you are just leaving university and the university hasn't, endowed you with the skills that, to use agents and, manage agents, I would suggest you do it in your own time and, build that app to manage the school football team or the, your friend's network or whatever, and learn how it does it. So, be the same as Clayton, the CEO of 𝗵𝗵𝗄, but for your own business of you, and then scale up, and eventually you might be running 𝗵𝗵𝗄 if you learn and you're good enough with it.
You give some advice to the young graduates. What about the C-suite? What they should reflect upon in an AI era today that could be mission critical for them in their business?
I think it's similar, like, a bit like we were talking about where the CEO has to own it. If I was the CEO, I'd be saying to or a non-exec, I'd be asking the C-suite, for strategy. Strategies are important, but how well do they actually understand it? Have they actually built a process? Have they led a project that has used AI to reimagine a process that makes it more efficient, that delivers an ROI? And if they haven't, if they're delegating it and they say, oh no, I've got a team looking at that, to me, that's a red flag. So the correct response would be, yes, I built this myself at the weekend, and then I've got my team helping me sort of productionize it and embed it into the system. And we're looking to get a 3% increase on this or a 2% reduction in that over the next 6 months. And if that goes well, then we've got a few other projects and candidates lined up, and we're looking to embed those. And if you're not getting that from C-suite members or VPs, or, whatever, pretty much in my view, everybody should be coming up with those solutions and suggestions. And if people aren't coming out, then, the first step is a bit of coaching and encouragement, kick up the backside. And the second step is, listen, maybe you're not for this company because we need to move forward. That would be certainly at the C-suite level. Other people at, other levels, they probably need more time for that. But if you're taking a C-suite salary, and you are not driving that forward, sorry, you wouldn't be for me.
If I was one of your potential customer and wanted to keep track on what Sold by AI is is doing next? What would you say are the things that is upcoming?
So we've got a few projects on. Some is adding more vertical engines, solving different problems that we don't have engines to do, so that we're broader in our offering. We're doing things like production scheduling. So we're looking to launch for restaurants. How much food do you get out when? How much do you make when? What time? And then build a schedule for that and automate that. Automate the production of that schedule. But another big part of it is explainability. So, still AIs are a black box. And what we find is we want to automate the explainability. So when somebody says say if I'm a store manager and it is building a schedule, or it is making a food production schedule, I can ask it, why have you given me, told me to make six of those puddings where I normally only sell 2 on a Saturday, and it ought to be able to come back and say, that's because you've got double the normal, treble the normal bookings, or some other answer that gives some sort of justification of why it wants you to do that. Or it might say, actually, the ROI from producing 6, even if you throw away 2, is better than producing 2 and not selling a third. Okay, so they're the sort of explainability that we want to get into the system. That you could imagine with the black box, potential black box sort of solution, that isn't as easy as it sounds, and that is one of the challenges we're looking at now.
Amazing. Thank you, Ian. That was a great discussion around AI and what is coming next for the workforce, but also for the C-suite. I appreciate the discussion. Thank you again for being in the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Kevin.
Thank you for listening to Leaders in Motion. And if you want to go further, join the Leaders in Motion Academy, our executive program. The first step is simple. Subscribe to our newsletter in the show notes, and you'll get access to our exclusive insights and all the details about the Academy. This podcast is produced by Melanie Hong, who helps leaders and organizations create strategic podcasts. I'm Kevin Hong, and see you next time.